Hello aviators, Sky here, and today we can finally fly to South America. Empresa Brasilia dell'Aeronautica went through a huge number of difficulties and invested a lot of effort into creation of their first regional jet airliner. ERJ did not remain in debt, turning its creator and its homeland into one of the world leaders of the aviation industry. Welcome to Brazil, welcome to Embraer. Embraer Regional Jet or ERJ, a regional passenger aircraft family developed by the Embraer aviation conglomerate in the 1990s. The family includes basic commercial airliners and, indirectly, business jets and military modifications. It is quite successful. By 2018, more than 1,200 planes have been delivered to the customers. The history of this aircraft is somewhat similar to the history of its Canadian competitor. And it began as always from the economy. In the 1970s, the world was shaking from an active rise in fuel prices. An oil embargo, the Islamic Revolution, a drop in demand and other features of that times. But the 80s were the time of price rollback, when the value of barrel during several years dropped from $35 to $10. This led to a serious economic crisis in the country's suppliers of energy resources, wars in the Middle East and so on. Yes, we like to say that we have to learn the lessons of history, but in practice we never do. However, for some people it was a problem, and for others good news. Cheap oil means cheap fuel. In the 1980s, a new age of rapid growth of air transportation began, especially the regional flights. In addition, the bonus was the fact that the old giants, Douglas and Boeing, made their planes bigger and did not offer modern models to replace their old planes, while Airbus did not produce small planes at all at that time. Of course, this market could not stay empty. Customers wanted new regional jet airliners and new companies started to answer their demand. One of these manufacturers was Canadair, or now Bombardier. This task was not very difficult for them. On the basis of the Challenger 600 business jet, Canadian engineers created their own regional jet, and in the 1990s the CRJ plane practically dominated the market. The Brazilian aviation conglomerate Embraer at the time was working mostly on light civilian and military aircrafts. But even the Brazilians actively developed technology and planned to enter the world of larger commercial and business transportation. The first step on this path was made in 1989, when, during the Paris Air Show, Embraer announced the development of their own regional jet. But unlike Bombardier, Embraer at that time did not have any medium-sized business jets, on which they could base any plane. However, engineers did not develop the plane from scratch, and took Embraer 120 Brasilia as the basis model. This small turboprop airliner was created fairly recently and had quite a good performance. It was decided to replace turboprop engine by the jet ones, extend the fuselage to accommodate 50 passengers, and adapt the airframe to a high flight speed. Exotic was the location of the engines, in the nacelles integrated into the wing. At the same time, it was supposed to cost about $11 million, nearly 20% cheaper than the Canadian CRJ. The future Embraer 145 Amazon was planned to take off in 1991. However, such a concept did not last long. Unification of course is good, but a jet plane with straight wings and engines inside those wings, too exotic for a commercial aircraft of the late 20th century. Due to these exotics, for a long time the company could not find buyers for these new planes. The problem was bigger. They could not even find subcontractors for the project, including the engine suppliers. As a result, in 1991, instead of the first flight, the plane went into the wind tunnel. Based on the results of the research, it was decided to mount the engines on the pylons under the swept wing. But there was a new problem. Aircrafts like the E-Jet or SSJ-100 are criticized for their engines being too low above the ground. And this is the same scheme on a very small 50-seat aircraft. So the 145's landing gear was greatly increased in order to raise the plane. This scheme was also controversial, and it was also rejected. The race for new and original airframes was stopped by the aerodynamics and economic laws. Eventually, the engines went to their place on a tail. By the time the design was finalized, new problems appeared. Brazil faced a serious economic crisis. Budget cuts also affected the financing of the state-owned aircraft manufacturer. And in 1994, a decision of privatization was made. 80% of shares entered the free market, while the government retained 20% of shares, nevertheless forming a block equity holding. Finally, the plane made its maiden flight in 1995. At that time, the model has the portfolio of 18 orders with an option for another 16, not impressive. And the production plan assumed the release of 29 planes in 1997, reaching the rate of 48 planes per year by 1999. But the flight tests were full of pleasant surprises. The aircraft proved to be very good. Fuel efficiency was 7% higher than previously planned, which in addition to a low price allowed Embraer to gain decent demand. In 1996, when EMB 145 was certified, the company already had firm orders for 62 planes and options for 218. A few words about the design. Boring. For the most part, it's an ordinary model regional passenger aircraft with a low wing and T-tail. Engines: Rolls-Royce AE3007, originally developed by the North American division of the British company. Such engines are used by all ERJ planes, as well as, for example, some Cessna business jets. The aircraft cabin has a width of 210 cm and height of 183 cm. Which makes it one of the narrowest in the class. Even the claustrophobic CRJ cabin is bigger. But I have to note that the cabin layout is 3 seats in a row, not 4. It makes the plane some kind of a minibus, but the individual space is slightly larger. And yes, there may be a question. A video is about ERJ. Why is our hero called EMB 145? The nuance is that the plane was the only child of Embraer at first, and the family began to form only in the late 1990s. During the development of the modifications, they created a brand Embraer Regional Jet, and the model started to receive ERJ names. So now we have reached the family. Let's take a look at the younger brother. ERJ 135 entered the lines in 1999. It is 95% unified with the older brother, and has a 3.54 meter shorter fuselage, accommodating 37 passengers. After some time, the middle brother ERJ 140 appeared, with a capacity of 44 passengers. At first look, the solution is very strange. 37 seats for one plane and 50 for second are enough. Where does this guy want to fit? The point is not the model line, but the indignant pilots. The fact is the main regional jet market was the United States, and the major airlines there had found a new way to save money. Instead of using the main aircraft parks, they outsourced the parts of the roads to regional airlines, generally to their own subsidiaries. The trick was the regional crews had lower salaries, which made it possible to cut the costs of airlines. But this little administrative magic was very disliked by the pilots of the major airlines, who lost their earnings because of those tricks. As a result of the epic story, the airlines and pilot unions came to an agreement, called the Scope Clause, on limiting the number of different-sized aircrafts in the airline parks, to divide where, on which planes and which pilots will fly. In the segment of regional air travel, this limitation has affected the number of aircrafts with the capacity of 50 passengers. To overcome this limitation, airlines wanted to get a plane with a capacity a little less, which causes the creation of 44 seats ERJ 140. However, this focus did not work for Embraer. The plane was created in 2001, coinciding with the September 11 terrorist attacks. The US aviation market has declined, practically cancelling the demand for this model. Only about 100 ERJ 140s were delivered. But the Brazilians were not discouraged. At the beginning of the new century, they created several military and transport modifications, and, most importantly, developed a business version of their ERJ-135, named Legacy 600. This aircraft can accommodate up to 13 passengers and has a range of approximately 5,600 kilometers. In fact, with this modification, the history of Embraer executive jets began, which now has a whole model line. Another interesting episode in the history of this family was the adventures of Brazilians in China. While trying to enter the growing Chinese market, Embraer established a joint venture with HAMC Corporation. The new company worked on assembling of the ERJ-145. Moreover, the Chinese have achieved quite a decent localization. It was the so-called Complete Knockdown or CKD assembly scheme. Nevertheless, Embraer has not gained much demand from local operators. The work of the joint venture continued until 2016. During this time, 40 ERJ-145 and 5 Legacy 650 have been created here. In the video about the CRJ airlines, I did not say anything about the accidents, and some of you were outraged. But if you are waiting for blood and fire in the ERJ history, then I have to disappoint you. The aircraft got into a lot of troubles, and 7 planes left the service after that. But with all those accidents, Embraer ERJ did not kill a single person. Yes, more than 1200 aircrafts, over 20 years of intensive operations, 0 victims. High quality, excellent service and good design, or maybe it was the giant cheeses, who knows. But the fact remains 0, an excellent figure for the statistics. However, there is one very unpleasant episode. In 2006, in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil, the Boeing 737 and Legacy 600 crossed their wings. Boeing lost the left wing console and crashed, ending 154 lives. Legacy was very lucky. It hit the unfortunate airliner with its wingtip, lost it of course, and received damage to its tail, but still successfully made an emergency landing. After the repairs, the plane returned to operation, and yes, it's still flying. Despite all the difficulties during the development, the ERJ-145 and its modifications have become a very successful family. Low catalog prices and high economic performance have made them very popular. But nothing is eternal, and the wave which once gave the birth to small jet airliners rolled back, dragging them along. Fuel price in the 2000s rose again. As a result, the turboprop regional aircrafts gain high demand. Their engines are much more economical, and the lower speed and comfort in flight are not so important on the short roads. Despite the fact that officially Embraer continues the ERJ production, the factory is occupied mainly by the Legacy 600 and 650 business jets. But Embraer of course did not give up its positions. Already in the middle of 2000s, Brazilians delivered the new flagship E-Jet family. Those planes feel good, and replacing the old generation, they do not intend to leave. Into the history of probably the main regional airliner we will dive the next time. But all this success in the industry Embraer owes to the ERJ family. Thanks for watching, like, comment and subscribe. Fast flights and soft landings to you.